The day my parents left me with my grandmother was etched in my memory like a stubborn stain that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I was 8 years old, too young to fully grasp the weight of what was happening, but old enough to sense the shift in the air, the growing tension in my parents' whispered conversations, and the look of worry in my grandmother's eyes. It was a summer morning when they told me we were going on a trip. I remember the sun being unusually bright, casting a warm glow over everything. I had packed a small bag, eager for what I assumed would be a fun getaway to my grandmother's house. She lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by lush fields and a thick forest, a place that always seemed frozen in time, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I didn't mind visiting her. In fact, I often looked forward to it. There was something comforting about her house. The old wooden floors creaked under your feet. The smell of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, and her tiny garden was filled with colorful flowers that seemed to bloom all year round. When we arrived, everything felt normal. My grandmother welcomed us with open arms, her weathered face breaking into a gentle smile as she hugged me tightly. She made us lunch, thick slices of bread with butter and honey, fresh from the garden. My parents and grandmother sat at the table, talking in low voices while I played in the garden, chasing butterflies and picking flowers. I didn't think much of their serious expressions, assuming it was just adult talk, as always. But when it was time to leave, something changed. My parents gathered their things and I ran up to them, expecting to be scooped up and taken back home. Instead, they knelt down beside me, and I saw the sadness in their eyes. "We need to go away for a while," my mother said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't understand. Go away? Where? Why? My father stood next to her, looking at the ground as if the answers were buried beneath his feet. "Why can't I come with you?" I asked, my voice small and confused. My mother reached out, smoothing my hair back, her touch gentle but trembling. "It's just for a little while. We'll be back soon, I promise." I felt the first stab of fear in my chest, something I had never felt before. "But why can't I come?" I repeated, my voice cracking. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. "We need to take care of some things," my father said, finally looking up. "It's safer for you to stay here with your grandmother for now." The word safer hung in the air like a thick fog. Safe from what? What could possibly be so dangerous that they couldn't take me with them? I didn't understand. And no matter how many questions I asked, they gave me the same vague answers, the same reassurances that it was only temporary, that they'd be back soon. But the way my mother held me in those last moments, the way she clung to me as if she was afraid to let go, told me that it wouldn't be soon at all. They left in a hurry, driving away without looking back. I stood in the driveway, watching the car shrink into the distance, feeling the world around me grow larger and colder with every passing second. My grandmother stood behind me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. She didn't say anything, but her silence was heavy with meaning. She knew, just as I did, that my parents wouldn't be back soon. At first, I clung to the hope that they would return any day. Every time the phone rang, I rushed to answer it, hoping it would be their voices on the other end. Every time a car passed by the house, I ran to the window, hoping to see their familiar faces. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and the hope I had held on to so tightly began to wither, like the flowers in my grandmother's garden, as the seasons changed. Life with my grandmother was quiet, almost too quiet. She was kind and loving, always making sure I was fed and clothed, always telling me stories before bed, and comforting me when I woke up crying in the middle of the night. But she wasn't my parents. She couldn't replace the ache I felt in my chest every time I thought of them, the gnawing emptiness that grew larger with each passing day. My grandmother tried her best to fill the void, but she was old, and there were things she couldn't do. She couldn't run through the fields with me like my father used to, or braid my hair like my mother always did. She couldn't make the world feel safe and warm in the way only parents could. But she loved me, and she showed it in her own quiet way. Through the meals she cooked, the sweaters she knitted, and the way she always listened when I talked, even when the words didn't make sense. I learned to adapt. I went to school in the nearby town, made a few friends, and slowly adjusted to the rhythm of life with my grandmother. But the loneliness never went away. I missed my parents with an intensity that sometimes felt unbearable, like a constant weight pressing down on me. Every birthday that passed without them was a painful reminder that they were gone, and each holiday felt incomplete, no matter how hard my grandmother tried to make it special. As the months turned into years, I began to understand why my parents had left. It wasn't until I was older that my grandmother finally told me the truth, in her own careful, measured way. There had been financial troubles, problems that my parents couldn't solve on their own. They had left to try and rebuild their lives, to make things better for me. But somewhere along the way, things had gone wrong. They had gotten lost in the chaos, in the struggle to survive, and the more time passed, the harder it became for them to come back. By the time I was a teenager, I had accepted that my parents weren't coming back. The pain of their absence had dulled, though it never disappeared entirely. I had grown up with my grandmother, learned from her wisdom, and become stronger because of her love. She had become my rock, my home, even though the shadow of my parents' departure still loomed over everything. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s, living on my own in a small apartment, that I finally received a letter from my mother. It was short, apologetic, and filled with regrets. She explained everything, how they had tried to fix their lives but had failed in ways they never anticipated. She told me how much they loved me, how they had always planned to come back but had been too ashamed to face me after so many years. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to be angry, to resent them for leaving me behind. But another part of me, the part that had grown up under my grandmother's care, understood that life doesn't always go the way we plan. People make mistakes, even parents. And sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is learning to forgive them, even when they've hurt you deeply. In the end, I was grateful for my grandmother. She had been there for me when no one else was, had loved me when I felt most unloved, and had taught me that family isn't just about the people who bring you into the world. It's about the people who stay by your side, no matter what. And though my parents never returned the way I once dreamed they would, I found peace in the life I had built with my grandmother, knowing that in her quiet, gentle way, she had given me all the love and stability I needed to grow.